Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about configuring our web server, which is Nginx. And this is what we have in mind. So we're going to set up a website, locally with the domain. Then we're going to talk about the basic configuration, virtual hosting and things like that. And then we're going to simulate real domains using etc hosts. Let's get started. First of all, let's just make sure that our Nginx server is running. So we can see that it is running and it is loading the default page. Now this is the default page and obviously we want more than that. So let's talk about configuring Nginx. Nginx configuration is located under the directory /etc/nginx. So the main configuration file is the nginx.conf. So let me open it. Sudo. We need sudo because this is owned by root, and to be able to edit them we need root permission. Sudo vim. Hopefully you guys know how to use vim. If not, go ahead and watch the previous videos on vim. Okay, so here we have the Nginx configuration opened. I'm going to quickly explain a few important things in this configuration file. I'm not going to explain all of them because they are not really relevant most of the time. So the first one is important because this determines which user the Nginx process runs as. In this case, it is www-data. And the worker processes auto means the number of Nginx workers that would be running on the system. Auto means it will calculate the number of workers depending on the number of CPUs present in the system. And PID is the PID or PID of the Nginx process. For example, if we take a look at this, we can see that it's 438. Now if we take a look at the Nginx process, here we can see that the master processor's ID is 438. Okay, and the other configuration here is the events block. For getting started, let's not focus on that at all because this is not really important at this stage. The next one is the HTTP block. So HTTP block is the block that configures system-wide configurations. So any configuration setting that you do here is usually applicable to all the virtual hosts or all the websites that's configured using Nginx. So all of these configuration options, don't worry about them. We will talk about them as we need them. Right now, we don't need them at all. One thing we do need them at this moment is the access log and error log. So Nginx logs each and every request by default into a file called var log nginx access.log, and if there is any error, then that is logged into error.log file. Now remember, this is a global configuration which can be overridden per host or per virtual host, which I will talk about. The HTTP block ends here. As you can see, it ends here, and we have a mail block here which is commented out. Don't worry about that. So here is another thing that we need to be aware of. In the main configuration, it is including two locations. One is etc nginx conf.d start.conf, and the next one is etc nginx sites enabled. So this means whatever configuration files are under this directory and this directory, they will be loaded when Nginx starts. So by convention, when we create a new website, it usually goes under /etc nginx sites enabled. If we take a look at that, you can see that there is a single file called default, and it is pointing to another file called /etc nginx sites available /default. That is because this is a symlink or symbolic link that is pointing to the original file here. So the reason why they do this is because you create all the websites under this directory, sites available, and you can easily enable them or disable them using symlinks. If you want to enable them, you just create a symlink from this to this one, and if you want to disable them, you simply delete this symlink. Now let's take a look at the configuration file itself. So this is the default configuration file. So most of the time when dealing with web servers and configurations, we will be dealing with this file, not necessarily the default file, but any file that contains a server block. So as I mentioned before, previously we looked at the HTTP block, which is the global configuration for Nginx, and server block is the website specific block. For every website that is hosted by the Nginx server, there should be a server block specific to that. You can have any number of server block in the same file as long as we follow the proper standards. So this is the server block for our default website. So here, as you can see, it is listening on port number 80, which we know, and it has a configuration directive called default server. This means if Nginx could not find any website matching the name that someone is trying to access a website with, it will fall back to this server block. Another important directive is the root or document root in Apache. So this is where our website lives. So here we can see that /var/www/html. Let me open another window. So if we go into /var/www/html, you can see there is a single index.nginx.debian HTML file which has all the whatever we see here. Now we can just edit it and simply put like, okay, I opened it as my normal user, so that doesn't work obviously. As you can see, the website has changed its content. So remember, this is the document root, and the next one is index file. So index file means like here we simply open the website name, in this case the IP address. We did not add like /index.html or anything, right? So index determines which file to get executed at first. For example, if I do, I change the index file to foo.html as the first priority, and then all the other files. And if I create a new file, now we have changed an Nginx configuration here, so we need to reload Nginx. So we can do that using sudo systemctl reload Nginx. So here, now it's changed to this is foo, because I changed the index directive to foo.html. The next one is the location directive, the server name. Now server name is the name of the website. A symbol underscore means it's a wildcard, it will catch anything. I will talk about the server name in detail in a moment. The next one is the location directive. So this is one of the most important directive in this configuration file, and as you host more and more complicated websites, this is the one that is tricky to get right. So here location / means to catch any request. So this is more like the / or root directory in the Unix file system. So this will be applicable to all the requests as long as there is no other location directive in the same server block. So what it does is try files. It will first attempt to serve the request as the file itself. What it means is, so remember this is my local machine right now. I'm doing curl. Okay, I haven't restarted Nginx afterwards. Let me reload Nginx. Okay, so we have the hello world here. So now if I make a request to something like this, it's a 404 obviously, because there is no file or folder named this. So what this means is it will first look for any file named AAAAA, and if it does not find it, then it will look for a folder named the same under this directory. And if it could not find that, then it will respond with a 404. Let me create a directory called AA. Now what happens if I try to do this? Can anyone guess? So in this case it says it moved permanently. We can use the -v switch to see what exactly happened or where exactly it moved to. So this is called a 301 permanent redirect. That means the request to this URL has been permanently redirected to this one. The keyword here is the location. This is the target location. So as you can see, at first it tried to serve this as the file itself and it could not find it, so it changed it into a directory. Now if we do that, it's a 403 forbidden. That means we do not have access, we do not have permission to access this directory content. That is because there is nothing in that directory. Now if I create a file under AA and let's say index.html, and I do the same, as you can see the output is there. This is AA. So that is how the try files work. Okay, so far so good. But now we need to work with domain names, not just IP address, right? Here we have opened it in a IP address, but we want it more like a domain name that we will actually be using in production, right? But we don't have a domain name yet. We haven't bought a domain. So how do we do that? This is where the hosts file comes into picture. This is very useful for local development of websites or even server configuration itself. Let's say I want to host a website called foobar.com. Let me check if this actually exists. It does exist, and this is not a domain that I control. It's someone else have that. So let's say I want to work on this domain and I haven't bought this domain yet. So what we can do is we can edit our etc hosts file on our local machine. Remember, this is our local machine, not the Debian virtual machine. And in this case, I'm using the WASL in Windows, right? That's why I'm able to edit this etc hosts file. But if you are not using WSL and if you want to edit the host file, you can just Google for, modify your host file in Windows. You can do that. So here I'm editing the /etc hosts file. So here you can add an IP address. In our case, 192.168.0.110 and a domain name. So I want foobar.com. So what this means is that going forward in this system, in this local machine, any request to foobar.com will be resolved to this IP first. So if I try to open foobar.com from my local machine, you can see that it says hello world, which is our default website here. So this is one way you use the domains that you want with the local development setup. Now obviously this is not going to work if you use it outside of your local system, because this domain points to some other entry as we saw before. Okay, so now I need to create a server block for our foobar.com. I don't want the default page served. I want a separate configuration for that. For that, I'm just gonna copy the existing default configuration and copy it into a new file. Let me just cd into the directory etc nginx sites enabled. Now remember, this is a symlink, and by default they use symlinks to enable and disable websites, but to keep things simple, I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to create a file under sites enabled. So cp sudo cp default and foobar.com. You know what? Let's create for foobar1.com. And I'm gonna edit my etc hosts entry to foobar1. Okay. So now we need to edit the configuration file to change a few things. First of all, we need to change this. We need to remove this default server. and we don't need this line because if you remember, we used it in the previous video. And this is for IPv6. We don't need that at the moment, so I'm going to remove that as well. So the next thing that we need to change is the root or the document root for the new website. Let me just say foobar1.com. And the important one is the server name. So here we have our domain name as foobar1.com. So I'm going to change the server name to foobar1.com. And that's about it. So now we don't have anything here. We don't have any directory named foobar1.com. So let's create that first. And let me create a file for our website. That says this is foobar1.com. Now if we reload Nginx, if I do curl foobar1.com, you can see that our website is working. This is foobar1.com. Now similarly, if you want to create foobar2.com, you just copy the same to the new file foobar2.com and you edit the foobar2.com file. The only thing that we need to change is the document root and the server name. And we need to obviously create the new file and new folder and the files. And done. So let's just reload Nginx now. Okay, obviously there is no domain called foobar2.com because we did not add them to the etc host file. So I have added another entry pointing to the same IP address, but this time with the name foobar2.com. And if I do curl, there foobar2.com works. And that's the simple configuration for Nginx. Now another interesting concept that we need to understand here is how does it work? How does the website, how does Nginx know the request is coming to foobar1.com or foobar2.com? This is where the HTTP headers come into picture. So using like domains like this is called virtual hosting because you're using the same server to host multiple websites. And this is how it works. If I add a -b to our curl request, this part is the request headers, or these are all the HTTP headers that are sent to this web server. And the first one is get, because this is a get request and our path is /. The second one, and this is the key one, that is the host or foobar2.com. So because I made a request to foobar2.com here, curl itself set the request header as foobar2.com. So when the request comes into Nginx, it looks at the header. It says, is it foobar1.com or foobar2.com? Now depending on that, then it looks up at the configuration file and see what to do when the request comes with foobar1.com. And it serves the file from the directory that is corresponding to the document root of foobar1.com in the configuration file. Now what happens if I open 192.168.0.110 with the IP address? Now this is going to show the hello world. Remember, this is the default page. Let me just change that to avoid confusion. I changed it to default page, and if I make a request again, here you can see it says default page. But now let me explain to you how this works. In curl, you can pass a header using -h, and in single quotes or double quotes you can pass the header. For example, here I'm passing the header host and foobar1.com. So now, even though we made the request to this IP address, we can see that we have the foobar1.com website served. That is because we specifically set the host header as foobar1.com. Now this is how each and every web server works. If I go here and do the inspect element and go into the network tab and reload the page and click here, because this is the request to the slash or the first request. This is the request headers, and here you can see the host header is this, because we are opening this IP address. But as I mentioned before, the etc host is only applicable to this WSL machine. It's not resolving here. If I open foobar1.com, this is not going to work because the DNS entry is not present. This is the same for any website. So for any website that you are making an HTTP request, the browser will send a host header, here in this case google.com, and based on that the web server makes the decision on which website to serve. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. See you in the next one.